Then after variations, what will happen next? Now the next is natural selection. Natural selection, or we can call it a survival of the fittest. Natural selection or survival of the fittest. Or survival of the fittest. So when there is overproduction and the food and the resources are limited, there will be struggle. Due to struggle, there will be certain variations, and the variations which are useful to the organism, they will be inherited to the next generation. And those which are not useful, they disappear. That already we have discussed, they will disappear. That means, in this case, those which possess useful variations, that we can call them as selective advantage. Because the variations are useful to the possessor, we can call it as selective advantage, and these variations will be inherited to the next generation. But those which have the harmful variations not required by the possessor, they are known as selective disadvantage. So these 2 points are very important also for examination point of view. So the selective disadvantage variations will disappear, while the selective advantage variations will be inherited to the next generation. Now to this, Darwin called it as natural selection. According to Darwin, it is known as natural selection, but according to Herbert Spencer, he called it as survival of the fittest. That means natural selection, survival of the fittest is same. But this is the term given by Darwin, and this is the term given by Herbert Spencer. Now after this natural selection or survival of the fittest, what happens next? Now the next salient feature is the inheritance of useful characters. Inheritance of useful characters. So as already we have discussed, the characters which are useful to the possessor, they are inherited. They are inherited to the next generation. But those characters which are not useful, they are not inherited. Now while Darwin put forth this point, he also told that the acquired characters, the characters which are acquired during the lifetime of an organism, they are also inherited. That means at this point, Darwin agrees with Lamarck. Darwin agrees with Lamarck in this point. That means the characters which are acquired during the lifetime, they are also, if they are useful, they are also inherited to the next generation. So that is the point of inheritance of useful characters. Now, then the next point is the formation of a new species. Formation of a new species. So this is the concluding point of Darwin's theory. That means there is overproduction. Due to overproduction, there is there is a limitation of the environmental resource like food and space, for which there is struggle. During struggle, there will be variation, and due to variation, there will be natural selection. The survival fittest will survive, others will disappear. Then those characters which are useful, that will be inherited. Those which are not useful, they will disappear. Now, those organisms which will have useful characters, that will be inherited from the parents to the offspring. That means from the parents, it will come to the offsprings. Characters inherited. So if the parents are quite fit, naturally the offsprings also be quite fit because the characters are inherited. Now side by side, the offspring will accumulate new characters. The offspring will accumulate new characters in addition to the characters that are inherited. That means likewise, generation after generation, always the offsprings will inherit characters from the parents and it will acquire new characters. That is why generation after generation, the organisms which will produce, they will be more fit to survive. And ultimately the variations will be so huge, so great, that ultimately we can tell that a new species is born. That is the main point, the formation of a new species. And new species thus arise by continuous and gradual modification of old ones. That means always we will inherit the characters from old ones, side by side we will accumulate it. Likewise, generation after generation, or we can tell after several generations, some organisms will be evolved which will be completely different from their ancestors, and we can call that is the formation of new species. So these are the 7 points or salient features of Charles Darwin theory. But his theory also subjected to criticism. So what is the criticism? So number 1 criticism is that what happens to the inheritance of small variations, which are not useful. So according to Darwin, only those variations which are useful, they are inherited from generation to generation. But what about small variations which are not useful, whether they are inherited or not? He didn't give any idea regarding this. Now the second point, in some organisms there is overspecialization. And in this case you can take the example of tusk of elephant, and that of the antler, and the antlers of deer. They are over specialized. So for what reason they are over specialized, that is not explained. Now the third one, what about the vestigial organs? The vestigial organs have no functions. Then why still they are present inside organisms? So that is a question mark. Then the next one. The next one is degeneration of certain organs. Why some organs are degenerating in the body? That is not explained by Darwin. And the fifth objection is no distinction. This is a very important point. No distinction between continuous which are non-heritable and discontinuous which are inheritable variations. This is a very, very important point. That means Darwin didn't distinguish between continuous and discontinuous variations or non-heritable and inheritable variations. There is no distinction made by the Darwin. And the last point of the criticism is Darwin lacks the idea or knowledge of heredity. Darwin lacks the knowledge of heredity. So these are the criticism. Then let us summarize the entire theory of Darwin. The entire theory of Darwin can be summarized by 5 observations and 3 inferences. So that very easily you can remember the entire theory. 5 observations and 3 inferences. So observations, then inferences. Now, first observation is that it's a rapid multiplication. And the second one is the stability of a production. And third observation is limited resources. So from these 3 observations, what the inference? The inference number 1 is struggle for existence. Then the fourth observation is variations, and the fifth one is inheritance of useful variations. And from these 2 observations, the inference is natural selection. So this is the inference number 2. Now if these 2 inferences, from these 2 inferences, one third inference is also there. From these 2, the third inference is formulation of new species. The third is formation of new species. That means from these 3 observations, the inference is struggle for existence. From these 2 variations, the inheritance character variation, natural selection. And from these 2 inferences, the third inference is formation of a new species. So these things that we have discussed in detail, and this is summary. In this way also you can easily remember. And Darwin's theory of natural selection is very important for examination point of view. So I hope now a very clear understanding about Darwinism or Darwin's theory of natural selection. Thank you very much for watching the video. God bless you. Have a good day.